Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Anirban. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning for some of you, I guess. I'm Eric Nawrzycki, co-PI on NSF CI Compass, and I am very delighted to moderate this panel on making major facility data AI ready. So the previous panel, we heard, how AI adoption across facilities is happening. Now we'd like to turn to a foundational question of what does our data need to look like before AI can actually help us. Uh, I want to say that, the inspiration for this panel was also, I want to send you back to the tech notes where Chuck and Don say that the most reliable AI programs grow up the strong FAIR practices. FAIR isn't just a compliance, it's a platform on which AI capabilities are built. So we have a very nice panel today. Also, I list here the archetypes that Chuck and Don mentioned in this. But again, I recommend reading this tech notes again. So today we have four panelists, and with no further ado, I think I will first give the floor to David.
Hey, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, my timing came out to exactly 9 minutes, so hopefully that will that will hold when I'm actually presenting. So, hi everybody, I'm David Butcher. I work on fair data management at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory and also as a research scientist in the ion cyclotron resonance facility, working primarily on top-down proteomics. So, just a little bit of background about the Mag Lab. We're a primarily NSF-funded major facility. It's the largest and highest powered magnet laboratory in the world. We have the mission of providing the highest magnetic fields for research in a variety of scientific disciplines, from condensed matter physics to materials research to environmental and biomedical applications. Our lab is split across 3 locations, hosted by Florida State University in Tallahassee, the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida, and Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Across these 3 sites, we have 7 different user facilities with different specialized instrumentation, leveraging high magnetic fields. My facility, the Ion Cyclotron Resonance Facility, specializes in Fourier transform ion cyclotron resonance mass spectrometry, but we also have facilities that provide NMR, MRI, and EMR capabilities, as well as continuous fields for a variety of applications in our DC field facility, and short, ultra-powerful magnetic fields up to 100 Tesla in our pulsed field facility, which is at Los Alamos. So with regards to AI readiness, the Mag Lab's goal, just like many other major facilities, is to support our users in performing AI-driven research and setting the stage to carry out AI-driven operations such as self-driving laboratories in the future. For the past few years, fortunately, we've already been working towards making our data fair through the Center for Fair and Open Science. Grab my highlighter real quick. Is that working? Oh, the highlighter's not working. There we go. We have this Center for Fair and Open Science at the Mag Lab, which we formed to ensure that all products derived from research done at the Mag Lab are shared according to the principles of fair data and open science. And the FAIR principles, of course, already contain the attributes necessary to make data AI ready, which relates to the comment that Chuck and Don made earlier, or that was quoted from them. From the beginning, the FAIR principles were envisioned to enable machine actionability. In particular, I'm thinking of the ones highlighted in red, with F2 and R1 being the most important. F2, data are described with rich metadata, and then R1, metadata are richly described with a plurality of accurate and relevant attributes. So that's where we'd like to get, metadata that describes data with a plurality of accurate and relevant attributes. Of course, there are obstacles to doing this. There are quite a few that I could cover here, but the ones that I see as the most fundamental that we need to address in the Mag Lab are shown here, and I'm also currently working to address these. So one of the first issues that we have is what CI Compass has referred to as the PI-centric approach that we have to user data management, which grants users a lot of leeway in how they acquire and transfer their data. Oftentimes, users will collect data on their own systems using their own software, and we never even see a copy of it, let alone have the ability to make it AI ready in any way, shape, or form. Another one is the lack of the cyber infrastructure that's necessary to facilitate that AI readiness. The vast majority of the data that we produce is not associated with rich metadata because there's simply no method to capture, format, and index that metadata and make it available to users. And because we have 7 facilities with different acquisition strategies for data, including in-house software that's been built here, software provided by instrument vendors, or sometimes solutions brought by the users themselves. We need something that can address a wide variety of these use cases. And finally, there are some significant practical limitations to the type and the comprehensiveness of the metadata that we can collect. So in some of our facilities, such as DC Field, users can construct a highly unique and specialized instrument configuration by hand just for that experiment, which is extremely impractical to capture metadata for that would allow reproducibility, let alone full AI readiness. So these first 2 we're working on addressing currently, and we have the beginnings of solution. I don't really have a good solution to this last one, but I wanted to throw it out here because I think it's important and something that major facilities, at least like the Mag Lab, need to think about in the future. So to address this need that we have for our FAIR and AI-ready metadata, we need a new cyber infrastructure solution that will generate rich and structured metadata for diverse data sets and constituent files of many types in an automated fashion. We need to allow for additional metadata to be entered by users because we know there are many details which can't just be captured by the instrument. There are sample preparation metadata details, for example, that users may have that need to be associated with the data for AI readiness. We need a solution that's platform agnostic and can be run on a variety of different data acquisition systems and can work on data in real time as it's generated or after data set acquisition is complete. So for some time, I've tried to find a way to build CI that would meet all these requirements. And while there are a lot of great tools out there, none of them were quite right for our use case. However, thanks to a CI Compass workshop early last year, we formed a collaboration with a team at CHESS, the Cornell High Energy Synchrotron Source, who are working on a piece of software called FoxDen. It's designed to provide a variety of services for creation and management of data, metadata, and provenance records. It functions as a back-end, and we're working on our own to develop a front-end, user-facing application that will have those desired characteristics and generate the structured, rich metadata that we need for AI readiness, and then send it to FoxDen for management and discoverability. So we have the beginnings of such an application. This is just an alpha version of a simple GUI application called FoxDelegate that I've started to put together, built in Python using PyQt6, which is a set of bindings for the cross-platform application development framework called Qt or Qt, I'm not sure which one it is. It can automatically generate metadata for files and data sets based on a combination of metadata provided by the user and potentially additional metadata extracted from the files themselves. Right now, there's only an extensive metadata extraction function for the most common file types that we use in the ICR facility. But the plan is to add metadata extraction functions for all of the relevant file formats at the Mag Lab, at least the ones for which we can actually get access to that metadata encoded within it. For some proprietary file formats, that might prove to be a little more difficult. So while I have experience building GUI applications in other programming languages, I did use LLMs, primarily Copilot, to accelerate the development of this application. And the vast majority of the work, at least forming the foundation, was completed within just a few days. So the new workflows that I'd like to see to enable the AI readiness of user data that we want to see are shown here. In this scenario A at the top here, a user works with a MagLab support staff to collect and generate FAIR metadata through the use of our custom platform-agnostic application, such as FoxDelegate, or similar capabilities built into the existing custom data acquisition software that already exists in at least 2 of our facilities, DC Field and Pulsed Field. In this scenario B at the bottom, in cases where a user is using their own system in order to collect that data, we need them to provide that data to a designated MagLab staff member at the end of their data acquisition, the end of their Magnet time, and then that staff member will ensure that the metadata record is created and uploaded into the FoxDen database using the existing methods or the methods that we'll create. In order to get users to do this, we need to make changes to MagLab policy. These are changes that I can't make, but that I'll be advocating for to enable the AI readiness that we want and then that users want to see. But in either case, the metadata will be managed in a local database by Foxden, and where it could also be made available to users and user program managers at the MagLab through our existing user portal, which they can then take and use for diverse AI applications. And I'm already at 9 minutes, so just really quickly, an example of the metadata. This isn't the actual metadata, but just the attributes of it. It's formatted in JSON LD for interoperability, using schema.org standards with science-on-schema.org guidelines, which we can talk about more later. We use existing controlled vocabularies in order to provide the contexts for the AI readability. We have a variety of different attributes related to data about the file, SHA 256 checksum for data integrity, user-provided information about the data set, linked data for the facility and the instrument involved, including RRID and ROR persistent identifiers for the facility, its parent organizations, and, if possible, the instrumentation. For mass spec raw files, we are able to use Thermo Fisher Scientific's raw file reader software to extract the full instrumental parameters from within the raw file to enable the full reproducibility of the experiment. So going back to the FAIR principles R1, have we satisfied the condition that metadata should be richly described with a plurality of accurate and relevant attributes? I think we're going in the right direction, but we can always do more. And just to test this out, I have tested some of this metadata with LLMs, asking it to perform a variety of simple tasks like generating a summary of the experiment or a summary of the instrumental method. For some tasks, it does a little bit better. For some tasks, it does a little bit worse. Overall, I'd have to give it a C+ and encourage that Copilot to study a little bit harder. A major limitation is the quality of the metadata that I'm providing to the LLM, so I'm probably being a bit harsh on the grading. But for at least some of these tasks, I believe that LLMs can be useful currently with the metadata the way we currently have it structured. So that's all I have, and I will yield to the next presenter.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And Ted is our next speaker. Ted, are you able to share your slides?
Yeah. Okay, I'm Ted Haberman from Metadata Game Changers. Thanks for this opportunity to talk. I was going to talk about something called DataCite today. And the last two talks have actually been a great setup for this. Many of you are probably aware of DataCite as a DOI provider for data sets and other kinds of resources. And right now, DataCite, so it's an international group with over 1,700 members. And it includes right now something on the order of 110 million resources with 28 different types and 36 different connection types. Today, I'm going to mostly be talking about connection types because I think they're a great opportunity for this community to use a standard metadata language and an open system for sharing that metadata. So the kinds of connections that DataCite includes are things like connections to detailed metadata, exactly what Dave was just talking about, connections to journal articles in archive or somewhere else, connections to other data sets, and also finally connections to researchers who are also identified by ORCIDs and their organizations recommended by or identified by RORs. So a rich family of connections that can be put into a standard metadata format that's shared by thousands of users around the world. And so the question really is, there have been a couple other talked mentions of RAG. And the question I'm really interested in talking about today, or introducing at least, is can DataCite metadata be used to support RAG, or retrieval augmented generation? So this is just a little bit more on DataCite. This is the growth in the number of DataCite records over time. And we can see that since DataCite started in 2004, the number has been increasing quite regularly. And this year they passed 100 million records for the first time. And I mentioned that DataCite has a lot of different kinds of resources. They're not just a focused, like for instance, Crossref or things that are focused on papers. DataCite started doing data sets, but now does a wide variety of different kinds of resource types. So that's a great thing that that some of you may or may not be aware of. There's a couple of blog posts from Metadata Game Changers and also from DataCite on this topic. And the most common resource types are shown here: data, text. Physical objects are samples that came in a big way in 2023, and quite a few images sort of dispersed over time. In the last 2 years, data sets have reemerged as the most common resource type, and most of that is because of the National Institute for Fusion Science, which is a facility in Japan. And over the last 2 years, they added 30 million data sets to DataCite. And I wanted to bring that to your attention just because it's something like many of the facilities that we've heard about talking about today who have many data sets. And the National Institute for Fusion Science in Japan is working closely with DataCite to make to identify those unambiguously and share access to discovery kind of metadata. So it's, I think, a great example of a group that may be similar to some of the groups represented here. This is just a list of other things that are other resource types that are available in DataCite. Some of them, these are interesting. The big ones are across the top, but things like projects, things like output management plans, software, conference proceedings, a lot of different opportunities for describing these resources. So one of the things about the DataCite metadata model, which is interesting, or at least I think it's interesting, is that it has a number of different fields that vary in detail. So in the upper left here, we have a resource type general, which is just a one-word keyword, in this case, instruments. We then have a resource type that with more detail, so a description, free text description of the resource type. Then titles and alternative titles, instrument names, for instance, or other more detail than either the resource type general or the resource type. And then text fields like technical information or abstracts, or there was some discussion earlier about methods. Another one. So the metadata itself also has some text fields and other more detailed fields that may be useful for integrating into some kind of a RAG architecture. There are also a number of different kinds of connections I'm going to talk about next. Also kinds of contributors, so not only authors, but institutions and sponsors and things like that. Many different contributors. Then, of course, funders, descriptions of funders and what they do. The important thing about DataCite is that of all of these sort of ideas or metadata concepts here, only 3 of them are required. So using DataCite effectively requires going beyond the required fields. I mentioned connections a couple of times. These are the common connections. You can see on the left is documented by references, etc. These first 2, which are over 30 million each, are both related to the National Institute for Fusion Science that I mentioned, because they have 30 million records, and all of their records take advantage of these kinds of connections. So the purple ones here are the connections that provide more a sort of full text connection to full text that could be useful or as documentation in the RAG kind of setup. This is again, sort of the picture of all these different kinds of connections. So there's quite a few different kinds of connections that can be made to things that could be then ingested into a RAG kind of analysis system. So one of the things that Dave talked about is really important is detailed metadata. DataCite is mostly citation and identification. We're interested in new use cases, but has metadata is what you use to point to that more specific kind of file level or granular level metadata that Dave talked about. The most common use of that is in GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and they use it in an interesting way. GBIF has over 1 billion species identification or species observation kinds of data sets. They have their own detailed metadata. When a user makes a query and selects a subset of those data sets, the query gets a DOI and goes into DataCite. And the metadata that is pointed to by has metadata is the metadata for that query. So it's not actually the metadata for the data, but it's the metadata for the query that you might use to reproduce that data set sometime in the future. The International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture also uses has metadata, and this is a more typical use. This is what the section looks like. So it has a related identifier, which is a URL in this case that goes to this detailed metadata. That metadata can be in any schema. In this case, the schema is a local schema, very much like Dave was talking about. A lot of data sets at the Mag Lab have their own metadata schema, and this is how you would deal with that. And then in this case, that schema also has a name. This repository actually has two kinds of more detailed metadata that they point to. This is the second one. Again, it has a schema here in this case, which is Dublin Core. So it's pointing from DataCite to another standard metadata schema. So both of these are examples of how you can integrate more granular level metadata or other standard metadata into your DataCite metadata. Is documented by is another thing. I use documented by to think about full text kinds of descriptions of things instead of structured metadata. So once again, out of the 30 million here, NIFS in Japan is responsible for 30 million, and so 262,000 are being used in other repositories. The most common is Pangaea, which is primarily an earth science repository for international earth science data sets in all over the world. It's in Germany. Zenodo, Caltech, high throughput experiment. You can see around the circle here others that are using this a lot. One being the Earth Observing Laboratory, which is a part of a facility, UCAR or NCAR. Once again, so this is for connecting to other more complete documentation. Finally, references, again, 30 million. In this case, 29 million are coming from NIFS. The Figshare academic research system. These connections are connections to papers and things like that. So Figshare is another one that certainly many of you are familiar with. Pangaea, the University of Cape Town. These are the repositories that are using these things already in their DataCite metadata. Pardon?
Yeah, wait. 1 minute, please. Okay.
Great. Yeah, this is the last slide. I worked on a project with Earthscope, another facility, and earlier this year we were able to add almost 500,000 orchids and roars to their DataCite metadata. So they went from having very incomplete metadata for those connections to 500,000 of them in their repositories. So that's actually a picture that shows we can actually do this. And that's the last slide.
Thank you, Ted. And Jeff, you'll be next. Jeff Blatchkin from NSF Ocean Observatories Initiative.
Okay, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it.
Good news is I didn't think I had 9 minutes. This is a shorter presentation. I just want to level set. We are at kind of the beginning stage, not quite our infancy, maybe our toddler stage of doing this. So I'll probably generate as many questions as I hope to answer. A little bit about OOI. We take real-time data from at our peak 900 instruments on 80 platforms across the oceans here. Some of these are no longer in the water, but we still have the data. But I think what's really important here to keep in mind, you should be able to see my mouse there, we're served by a united cyber infrastructure. That'll become important in a slide later. And our data are freely available online. And we have a 30-year lifetime starting in 2016. So we're about a third through. Our mission, again, it's going to be very important to our conversation. We do not conduct research. We provide quality data to the research community. And some of the data collected here, as you can see, is observational, surface variables, humidity, pressure, vector, oceanographic, salinity, sea level. We also have biogeochemical sensors with nitrate. We also monitor an active volcano. But some of the other types of data, less traditional data we have is acoustic, image, and video. So at this point, we have 200 billion rows of numerical data in our database. We have 2.8 petabytes of raw data, about 15,000 hours of HD video. I think we can all agree no one can necessarily look through all that video and find what they're looking for, and they will need help there where AI will become very important. Same with 3 million digital still pictures, and this is an older number, so we have greater than 400,000 hours of hydrophone. Last quarter, we delivered a fair amount of data, 35 terabytes across 12 million requests. That's our raw data. Now, our raw data, as you'll learn, is literally off the instrument. We have done no processing to it. And then 16 terabytes of our calculated data across 62 million requests. I only thought it fair that if we're talking about AI, I would get AI involved in helping me build this slide deck. So I asked a popular AI bot, rhymes with Google, how can I make scientific data AI ready? And you can see the result in the box here. It's a systematic process of collecting, cleaning, structuring, enriching high quality metadata, focusing on a specific use or establishing robust governance for ongoing quality and accessibility, with the steps being standardizing formats, handling missing values, adding context, data lineage, and implementing security with a scalable architecture. So the good news is, probably because of FAIR, as we've all been talking about, we do a lot of these things. So I want to point out below, this came out to 6 categories with 15 specific actions. And I have some boxes on there. Red, obviously, we're not doing it. And then the green, the darker the green, the more mature our process is. Now, one of the areas that the AI talked about was defining use case. And this is where we struggle, or I struggle. We don't do science. So how do we make our AI data ready for our users without actually having a defined use case? And this is our challenge. And how far can we go before we start to do science? From a collection point of view, standardized formats, we put it in a database. We follow the climate and forecast model, community model, so we're CF compliant. Not all of our data falls in within that model. So we know here that we're probably going to have some edge cases. Data cleaning, we handle missing values, we detect anomalies, and we remove duplicates. We have a robust automated QA system that, as you can see, this needs a little more required. We're implementing. We're not 100% implemented yet, but a large portion of our data does get automated quality testing. Address-backed effects, this is mature. We have a mature method of correcting variations through calibrations, what we call our metadata interface, and then we regenerate the data. From a metadata point of view, we have robust metadata. We have a lot of metadata, probably more so around data lineage. The context and the tagging, I think we probably will have more work to do in that area. But again, without a specific use case, we don't know how much more we'll need to do. Governance and ethics, we have plenty of governance. We have a lot of security. We do monitor our data. We are getting to versioning. That is on our roadmap. We'll be there shortly. However, are these policies and security really AI focused? Not as much. I think for creating data is probably not going to be as impactful as we might think. And then accessibility and architecture. I think our CI is ready for that. I think our cyber infrastructure is ready for this. We are already centralized. We have GPUs, not very many, but we do have GPUs that we've been able to use. We've enabled our APIs. We have machine interface APIs. You also can discover data, download it yourself. But we talked about a pretty heavy data load a few slides back. So we implemented Jupyter Hub, where users can come to us, use our compute facilities, and read the data directly on our servers. So how do we know if we're being successful? We've done some POCs. Like I said, we're early on in our process here. I would say we're most mature in the machine learning area. We've had successful POCs around data quality checks for photos and videos. Did the lights come on? Is this a relevant video, or is it a test video or a picture? We've also done it for content categorization. This is a pretty long video. What are you going to see in here? We've pulled out 9 of the most common images, and a user would be able to see that. That's a POC. We don't have that in production yet, but I expect that it will go. And then object identification. Again, classification. We've had a successful POC there. We also will be implementing in production relatively soon that a user-based model. So we didn't come up with this, our user community did, that they would like us to implement. But we talk about observational data, we talk about some of these, but there's also a rich amount of data in our code, our Python code, where we determine how we're going to produce our data. And we've put a LLM on top of that, so users can ask, how is temperature calculated? Again, we're in our early stage development, but we've seen some pretty promising results. Same with documentation. That will help help desk and let people kind of ask, so where is the OI? Where are its moorings? But from an observational data-centric point of view, we really we have all of our data goes into a netCDF file form. It's basically a data lake. It needs a little bit more relational structure put on top of it, and we're in an early stage there. So the goal there is that someone can come in and say, okay, where is temperature? How many times you measured it? And can you compare it to something else that we measure? And then we're also going to look at our data structure for AI consumption using an analysis tool. This is how we're going to prove, are we doing this right? Are we not doing this right? And right now we've picked Adrian to do that. I've got 20 seconds left. I will say I was able to go into we have a private chat GPT, and I was able to say, can you find temperature data in the Atlantic from the OOI and relate it to the North Atlantic Oscillation? And it did it. It provided the code, provided the file. The only thing it wouldn't do is integrate the data. I had to download the file. And then do it. And it did map it, and it did it nicely. So the work we're doing is slowly but surely getting there. And I always like to show this picture because this is how I feel when I'm dealing with AI and all the changes that come out month after month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Very nice talk. And I love the video at the end. Okay, and our last speaker is Eric Sokol from Neon. Eric, are you there? Oh, you're there. Okay, perfect.
I am here. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very good.
All right, I'll share my screen here.
Okay.
So my name's Eric. Oh, sorry. So my name's Eric Sokol. I'm an ecologist at the National Ecological Observatory Network. So today I'm going to be talking about how we're working to make our data AI fair. And first, I'll give you a brief overview of NEON and kind of walk you through some of the aspects of the observatory and how it relates, so that it'll help you understand the context we're talking about here in terms of making our data AI fair. So NEON is an observatory of ecological and environmental data, and it's distributed across the United States. We have 47 terrestrial sites, 34 aquatic. We publish over 180 different types of data products, and the duration of the observatory is planned to be 30 years. We began full operations in 2019. And so we have three kind of flavors of data that we collect and publish, but you'll see as I kind of move along through this talk that our data are quite diverse and heterogeneous. So we have automated instrument systems, and so that's sensors where data are collected at the level of hertz for a frequency. And so those data stream to our data port, will stream to our system and then get published in our data portal. We have observational sampling, so a much lower frequency where people are the instruments that go out and either collect observations or they collect samples that then get sent off to labs and are analyzed, and we eventually ingest those data and publish them in our data portal. And then we have the airborne observation platform, where this is remote sensing data that is collected either, on an instrument that includes hyperspectral data, a LiDAR instrument, and then also a high-resolution RGB camera. And these instruments are flown over our sites approximately 4 out of every 5 years. And that's at peak growing season. So you can see we have many different frequencies of data collection, different spatial resolutions, different types of data to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. Here's a schematic of an aquatic and terrestrial NEON site, just kind of a cartoon to help get you oriented. And you see we have various sensors for terrestrial and for terrestrial observations, sensors in the aquatic system, net stations, soil sensors, people out there taking measurements. We have grids of traps for collecting mammals or mosquitoes or inverts, so lots of different sorts of things. And so similar to the Ocean Observatory Institute, we have lots of different types of data, and we don't necessarily know how people are going to be using it. So that's a challenge that as we think about fair data from NEON, that's something we're thinking about. Currently, users interact with their data either by going to the web UI for the data portal that's listed here. And then we also have documentation on how to work with our API, and we have code packages we've put together. Our data are served up with metadata, so we have API endpoints for our data products using schema.org. Also, we have really rich ecological metadata language, metadata or EML, that comes with data downloads. This is something where there's lots of different ways to serve up your metadata, and different user communities expect it in different ways. And different user communities of NEON use different sorts of metadata. So this is something that we're grappling with. Another point I want to touch on is that beyond our data portal for structured data coming from NEON, we also have over 100,000 specimens and samples per year that, as I mentioned, we collect them, send them off for analysis. Eventually, those get archived at the biorepository at Arizona State. And then here we have data that are associated with the digital extended specimens. And so these data are served up instead of per observation, they're per specimen or per sample. And we have a data portal for these sorts of data, but then these data also then are shared out. For example, if we're appropriate with the Barcode of Life data system, or with GBIF, or with iDigBio. And then when we're sharing data to these external data portals, we don't necessarily have control over how they're shared, but we need to think about how those data and metadata get published there as well. The last aspect of NEON that I want to touch on before I kind of talk about some specific examples with AI is, as I mentioned, we have lots of different use cases. Our mission is to essentially collect and publish high quality research grade data for folks conducting terrestrial research across the US. And we don't know what those use cases are going to be. So, similar to what Jeff was saying, we don't necessarily do the science. We collect the high quality data and publish high quality data to enable science. And so there's lots of different ways people use our data. We don't necessarily anticipate what those are. And so this is also coming to surface as people come up with different ways to use AI tools to access and ask science questions about our data. So kind of summarizing the challenges we have in terms of understanding what AI readiness means for NEON, we have challenges and opportunities for thinking about how we can make data AI ready and implement tools for operations, so internally, but then also thinking about evolving standards and technology. So the life of the observatory, took a decade or more to build the observatory, but then we're going to be collecting data for 30 years and technology is, obviously changing. So we need to think about how to implement that. And then data management issues, QA/QC, there's opportunities there. And then the big one is meeting fair principles in the age of AI-enabled science and how things are changing and how there's a diverse user base. So NEON was built upon open science and fair principles, but AI fair is not necessarily the same as what fair meant when NEON was initially started publishing data. And so I'll take a minute to talk about a couple of different opportunities that kind of give you an idea of how we're thinking about these things. So the first is thinking about AI fair documentation. So this is all the mountains of unstructured data that we have associated with NEON. So lots of different SOPs, field safety protocols for people going out in the field, tutorials, things like that. So there's a team that put together this virtual interface for NEON expertise, a chatbot essentially that is ingesting a lot of this information and using a RAG-based stack. And so this is something we're testing it out with field staff to look up safety docs and protocols and sensor maintenance documents and things like that. So it's cut down on time a lot for people looking up documentation. But then this is an opportunity also to make our unstructured data more fair. And as an example, we've partnered with Sam Roy. He's put together this, he's developed this chatbot for looking through tutorials as an example. So a work in progress that is pretty cool. I'll move on to touch on some of the aspects of NEON's open infrastructure. I think this is a unique aspect of NEON. So we can serve as a test bed and benchmark for new technologies, essentially, for data acquisition that use AI tools and infrastructure. So you've heard about Sage already, and you'll hear more about it, I believe, tomorrow, but coming up in this series of workshops. And so this team, led by Pete Beckman, they're developing edge compute tools that enable AI at the edge. So if they have a bunch of nodes, but 17 of their nodes are at NEON sites. And so there's opportunities here to develop edge computing AI tools to collect data. Another example is working with the biorepository. So we've been partnering with the Imageomics Institute, and they've developed a workflow for imaging specimens, and then they have this AI-enabled workflow to create AI-ready data that they then publish on Hugging Face, where we have images of segmented out beetle specimens that you can then ask ecological questions with. All right. Next example is touching on community of practice and our role in that. So we are working with a bunch of other folks to essentially understand what are requirements for AI-ready ecology for biodiversity data infrastructure. So this is led by, again, the Imageomics Institute at Ohio State. They're partnering with us, NatureServe, and Duke as the kind of core folks running this program. And basically, we're trying to get together data providers, data users, cyber infrastructure providers, people developing ML and AI tools to understand how do we need to structure our metadata and serve it up or build tools to enable the different sorts of AI science questions people are asking or the AI tools people are building. So one of the things that's really interesting coming out of this is that FAIR doesn't necessarily mean AI fair, and defining where those gaps are and how do we fill them. And then once you come up with FAIR for AI guidelines for a data provider, we need to understand the different specific AI use cases to make data AI ready for those applications. One example is that for those beetle images, making data AI ready for that particular use case is not the same as making other sorts of data AI ready for other applications that Neon users may be doing. Okay, and just kind of a couple of specific examples of people developing tools. We're working with Renato Figueiredo and his group. They're part of the iChat Bio group. So they're developing an agent-based system where iChat Bio kind of coordinates the use of other agents that know how to query and pull data from different data repositories in ecology. So this is to facilitate synthesis across ecology using chatbots. And so they're working on an agent that understands how to query Neon's API and actually give you better results when you want to, query and download Neon data. Another example is folks from our remote sensing team working on to develop a stack metadata browser for Neon data. So kind of different standards for serving up data in that community. Some of our data have been pulled into some larger efforts building AI-ready data sets kind of at a larger scale in remote sensing. And the last thing is, I'll mention we're working with some folks from the HDR community. So we're contributing to this ML challenge that's going on right now. That's, again, we're producing an AI-ready data set, that beetle imagery data set that's being used in a challenge where people are building AI models to answer a science question. So a very different use of AI than just LLMs querying our data. And so I'll leave it there. Just lots of different ways people are using Neon data in this space. So it's quite a challenge for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. Sorry. Thank you very much. Distraction here. So yes, while we have a discussion, I think Nikki will also again open a poll. We have another interesting question to answer, and please, spend a few seconds or maybe half a minute on answering this question. But at the same time, we welcome questions to our panelists. Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and also switch on the camera and introduce yourself. I know it's like multitasking here.
So I have a question. So you talked, about how your facilities are using data, David, using AI for data management. David, you mentioned that you see the view where a scientist would work with one of the staff to enable these kind of technologies. I was wondering, from the users that you see, do you see a lot of desire to go towards AI tools, or whatever attitudes of your users in terms of adopting these technologies for the work and for the data that you produce or they produce with you?
Yeah, just anecdotally, we haven't seen a huge amount of interest, but I'm not aware of every user, because we have over 1,000 users a year. So there very well could be some users who really want those capabilities but are not communicating with us about it. Actually, I'll be doing a survey later in this year to try to get that kind of information from our users. Is this something you want to see? What kind of implementation would you like to see? I'm also going to talk to our annual user advisory committee, which is happening later in the year, about this issue. But we're still very early on, so we don't really have a good sense of what the users want yet.
Jeff, you unmuted yourself. You have some comments on that?
Well, we've heard some, through our governance committees, which are made of users and speak to a lot of users. I think it's a fair amount. I know of a lot of great work being done with video and images, but when it comes to the observational side, I think people are asking the questions. I think they're starting to think about it, but I don't know of anything that's necessarily in motion yet. But I think if we don't have an answer for them, they may not go down this path with us. So we kind of like we have to work in step with the users on this.
Yeah, it looks like the examples that Derek you had in your presentation kind of go towards engaging the community on that, right? And seeing how people can use the data with AI tools.
Yeah, so we've recently stood up an innovation advisory committee where we have external advisors who are experts in this area, basically like kind of serving as points of contact to help us understand this question. But then, yeah, we also have, so Neon has this Neon Research Support Services stream where people proposing projects kind of come to us and say, they want to do these different things. And so we have a pretty good sense of who's proposing to do what with Neon data, and there's a lot coming in this regard too. So that kind of gives us a feel of where people are going.
Thanks. Ted, you work with Earthscope, right? So prior Sage Engage, and do you see, them and other users of your technologies demanding this more AI-ready type of approaches?
Yeah, I would say that, it's still, as in many of these cases, still pretty early days. I think that the CI Compass webinar is sort of in the early days, and I expect to see a lot more of this, these kinds of applications in the future. Like, I mean, Eric showed, for Neon, it seems to be doing a lot of this stuff already, and having this webinar, I think, is really a great exposure to think about these things and how they might be applied in more specific situations.
Thanks.
Any other questions? So maybe I have a question to Jeff and Eric. So both OI and Neon generate vast amounts of data without really predefined scientific use cases. And my question is, when you develop AI tools for data quality or categorization, where do you draw the line between, or to ensure the facility remains an enabler of science without influencing scientific outcomes through your AI processes?
Well, we used unsupervised models to categorize the images. Just categorizing the image really doesn't do science. It's simply saying this image has something in common with this image, and the user can use that to then maybe do their work. We have, thanks to CI Compass, we've had interns come in, and we did have them answer a couple of science questions, because that's not something that we would do. And we did ask them to categorize images in there using these same frameworks that we've used to do that what I just talked about. And we've had some good success there, identifying clouds or ice. We were looking for icebergs going past one of our moorings. So we used it for that.
Thanks. Eric, you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And so I focus on the observational data at Neon. So I can mostly speak to that, but my understanding of across Neon is we don't use AI in our data quality yet. We've been doing some exploratory stuff. We do use machine learning models, but we're not using AI to make decisions about things. So I kind of making that distinction between sort of generative AI and machine learning techniques. I think that we use standard approaches that use machine learning in our field, but I think that that stuff's well documented, and our documentation is pretty open with regard to that.
Thank you. Chuck, you had a question, right?
Yeah, with respect to education. Anecdotal conversations with scientists, there is some pressure to start adopting AI, but there's not necessarily a lot of guidance to how these things are useful, other than, hey, why don't you go start talking to ChatGPT and see if that can help you to do better science, versus sort of more targeted things of, well, here is a particular scientific use case. This is how you can use AI to help you to do science in a good way. And so what I'm sort of wondering is, from a AI ready data perspective, what role education you think might play in terms of people understanding how to use AI to access your data or adopt your data, and having examples, and what form that education might take in order to be useful.
Nikki, I think you can close the poll. But thank you. Okay. And who's going to answer Chuck's question?
I can take a stab at trying to answer this. So this is one of the primary issues with AI adoption, not just in science, but across every part of our economy, right? Is that things are being kind of pushed in this direction without really having a clear roadmap or a clear vision of specifically how it should be implemented. I think one of the things we can do as major facility personnel is, if you're fortunate enough to be in a position like me where you can do your own research, have your own research efforts, you should actually go about envisioning those solutions, those practical implementations, doing them, and then showing them to the user community. Because, I mean, the thing that people always want to see is an example, right? Like, show me what's been done before, and then I can try to figure out some new thing to do. So lead the way in developing some of those implementations. Try to connect with people in specific disciplines that are relevant to the facility to figure out what they're doing and present that to the user community. These are things that I'm intending to do later on this year when I do speak to the user community. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, I can.
Another comment.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that's kind of a similar approach to what we do at Neon. So we have a pretty well developed library of tutorials using Neon data. So as people, as our user community works with us to develop, AI based applications or ways to look at our data, we'll work with them to create documentation that we put in the tutorials. And people do use our tutorials in classes and things like that. So, for example, we worked with the Ecological Forecasting Initiative and created some tutorials on how to use Neon data in forecasting. And so I imagine as they kind of add AI approaches into their forecasting for some of the use cases, that'll we'll start publishing those tutorials on our tutorial page.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I think Ted has his hand raised, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, Ted, yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh yeah. I think this question of education, I think one of the things that's important is to try and give people ways to get out there sort of into this AI, or in a lot of people talking about RAG here, into that theater without having to learn a lot of new things. So, I mean, one of the things I like about DataCite is a very well known, they're completely standard metadata tool and metadata standard, and people aren't really taking advantage of these connections yet. So they can improve their metadata, open to everybody, and start using that as maybe a foundation for finding related things. There's been a lot of discussion so far today about using things that are in-house sort of related kind of things. So I think minimizing the amount, or focusing the education in areas where things need education, and taking advantage of things that don't need education, I guess, would be my sort of quick thoughts on that.
Thank you, Ted. Any other questions to our panelists or comments? So maybe again to David and Ted. So David, you're building Fox Delegate to generate structured metadata, and you Ted, you highlighted the data size comprehensive connections. And the question is, how do you envision these tools and standards specifically bridging the gap to allow AI not just to read but also semantically understand the nuances of your experimental facilities parameters, especially for highly custom setups?
Yeah, so I guess I can go first, maybe. So the tool that I'm building specifically, how do I envision it bridging the gap to enable the AI to actually make use of the data contained therein? I think that metadata schemas like DataCite already provide the kind of attributes that are needed to provide the relevant context. That in combination with things like discipline-specific controlled vocabularies can, I believe, already provide enough detail to really be parsable by an LLM, at least in the experiments that I've done. Even without using significant controlled vocabulary terms, I've seen that LLMs are able to still understand, for example, the instrumental method parameters that are extracted from a data file. Because the terminology, as long as the terminology is at least somewhat standard, you don't always need the CV term to be exactly correct. So I think what exists is already sufficient, and we just need to focus on implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's standard metadata. I had a little bit of a discussion about what's available in the DataCite schema, but I think the most interesting thing here is the connection to sort of vast, unstructured documentation and things like, I thought what Eric was showing, sort of like these tutorials, and things that I can't remember who was showing, sort of the access to these technical documentation for how these things work. I mean, metadata is important for identifying things and in my opinion, for making connections to things and finding the relevant things that are relevant, papers, other data sets, technical information, for instance, relevant to particular data sets, I think. So that's where I think the AI stuff is going to help.
Thank you, Ted.
And I had one other thought on that subject. One of the things that's majorly missing in terms of getting AI to actually do what you want it to do with regard to using the structured metadata, at least in the experiments that I've done, is providing the context of what's important. Because AIs obviously don't understand anything, but they don't have the context of what, for example, instrumental parameters are relevant for reproducibility to an actual experimentalist. And if we can figure out some way to provide that context in a self-contained way within the metadata, I don't know how, then that could help the AI to actually produce a result which the user of AI would like more. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Maybe one last from me, kind of.
I think
maybe...
Shauna has one.
Oh, yeah, there is one. Okay, sorry. Yeah, Shauna, go ahead. Thank you, Nikki.
Sure. Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everybody. Shauna with Orchid. Thank you for the presenters. I appreciate it. I think one of the things I was thinking of, and of course, this is from Orchid's perspective, is we've been talking about AI and use for doing the analysis of science, for the actual research itself. But I think another way research facilities could really use AI is more on the administrative side. The administrators who are going to be assessing, who is using our facility, what came out of it, just quantity wise, because they have to do reporting to stakeholders. And I think AI tools could help them do those high level statements. Of course, they write these lovely complimentary, ego boosting statements for us, make us feel great. Why not use them to make your research facility look great, to stakeholders, and to report on the wonderful things that you do, the money that you've brought in, all the wonderful outputs that have come. I think AI tools could really be useful to the executives, and the administrators to report out of the wonderful things that have been done. So, but of course they need that data, of what's been happening internally. And so to give them all the data that we've described, to feed them, and then that way they can tell the beautiful, wonderful stories of what's happening at your facility. So I think, AI is not perfect and, as we said, reliable. And would you trust it to do? I would trust it to tell a beautiful story about my facility. I think it could do that really well. So anyway, I just thought I'd add my 2 cents to the conversation on that.
Shauna, I'm putting.
So Shauna, is there an example of a beautiful story told about ORCID with AI?
I'm working on that right now. It's interesting which tools harvest ORCID's data and which do not. So I'm kind of tinkering with that right now. And some companies like us and some don't, I think. So there's some politics there that we have to manage, and maybe have to do a little stakeholder engagement on ORCID side too. So, but all of you, you're all ORCID friendly groups. So, one other thing that's interesting is with ORCID, we've got our public data file, data that's set to public. That's in Google BigQuery, and they've just added Gemini on top of Google BigQuery. So you could then, use that AI tool to say, like what came out of, and then what's in ORCID's data set that's relevant to my facility or my people. You could just, even have a summer student or an admin do that and see what the results are, just for something quick, So, Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck. I realize we are past time, but I don't want to cut it.
Quick corollary to what Shauna said. So even though the models are pretty sycophantic now, they aim to please. There are models out there that are less sycophantic, and there are ways that you can basically ask it to be critical. And so just as well as you want nice stories written about you, you might also want suggestions about areas where you can improve, right? And so that may be an upcoming area where these models might start to become more useful, because it's a known sort of problem with the existing models. And with that, I will pass back to Yar.
Well, I think we're gonna be closing for today, but I want to defer it to Eva.
Yes, so I want to thank you, everybody, all the panelists, presenters, participants. It was a great first day. I'm very glad you're here, and I hope you come back tomorrow. We're starting again at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, which is a pleasant time for people. And tomorrow we're talking about AI tooling and how it can be incorporated into the data lifecycle within major and mid-scale facilities. Chuck Vardaman will be running the morning, and then we also have lightning talks from our community. And I think we shared some of the materials also that are online on Zenodo, and also Chuck's videos in case you're interested in finding out more about that. And so thank you again for a great first day of this workshop. I appreciate it. See you tomorrow.
Thank you all again.